Forbidden Fruits 2026 is another addition to campy women-led films that are popular among female audiences. It follows the employees of the clothing store Free Eden and the dynamics of the coven they form with each other and their new recruit, Pumpkin. Pumpkin, however, for her own reasons, seeks to infiltrate the group and find out the secrets of each member. Through following the close relationships between these girls, the film displays the hypocrisy among the members of the group and how they choose to express themselves while still maintaining the strict rules set forth by the coven. Today we will be exploring each coven member at the Free Eden store, as well as their beliefs, actions, and relationship to each other. Apple is portrayed by Lily Reinhart, most famously known for her role as Betty on Riverdale. And given how ridiculous Riverdale could be sometime, this movie seemed right up her alley. Apple leads the Free Eden Coven with a bit of an iron fist. Her calm demeanor throughout most of the film exudes authority. She and the other girls are very particular about who gets to join their coven because, as these movies typically go, they are the group everyone wants to join and they're at the store everyone wants to work at. The most obvious trait of Apple is that she has a problem with men. She don't like them, showing clear disdain when the other coven members give the men around them the benefit of the doubt. She even blatantly projects her own family dynamics onto a random male customer when she sees him shopping for his family. Her sexuality is never directly stated, so I don't assume her general dislike of men equates to a romantic or sexual liking of women. Yes, she does kiss Cherry later in the movie, but that was clearly to deflect from Cherry holding her accountable for her actions, and she outright scoffs when it doesn't work. But if I had to guess, I'd say Apple is a lesbian, solely based off her manicure alone. Moving on to the actual coven's rules, which kinda also reflect Apple's general disdain for men. The first rule being that all women have an inner glow and should surround themselves with other women so they can all shine brighter, and that they never do anything to dim another woman's quote-unquote light. The second rule is that they banish all vindicars, aka demons, that derive pleasure from other people's pain and misery. And the third rule being that they only text boys using emojis. There are inherent issues with each of these rules. The first rule is too vague because what constitutes as dimming another woman's light, and who decides that this offense has taken place? Is simply trying to hold another woman accountable for their actions dimming their light, like how Cherry tries to do to Apple later in the movie? Or is accidentally outdressing her on her special occasion a slight? Going by rule number 1, anyone could take a simple act of self-care or self-love from another woman as dimming another woman's light. Since Apple is the leader, is it only her opinion of what dims another woman's light that matters? Questions that need answers. For rule number 2, it's the same issue. Who is a vindicar or a demon? And how do we decide they're deriving pleasure from other people's misery? Well, the movie shows you exactly who the Free Eden Coven considers vindicars. And spoiler alert, they are simply people who are obstacles to the cult's wishes, or more specifically, Apple's wishes. There are two people the coven hexes, or attempts to hex. One being Sharon because they believe she may fire Pumpkin, and the other being the boyfriend of their former coven member Pickle. And that was simply because Apple didn't like how much Pickle's relationship took away from their friendship, which is not a new concept among female relationships. There are times where one friend may begin to prioritize a significant other, and their previous friends may feel abandoned and betrayed. There is also the case in which the friend that is in a relationship does continue to make time for her friends, but it is still not enough for the other party who feels abandoned because they want absolutely no change in their current dynamics. Now, this can happen in both platonic or homoerotic female friendships. Again, Apple's sexuality is not made completely clear. Can't say for sure which dynamic Apple's and Pickle's friendship fell into. And for the last rule, we only text boys using emojis. This heavily isolates the girls and limits their communication. Not to mention, the rule is misleading itself because later on, we see Fig's boyfriend speaking to her in emojis when he feels they're not alone, indicating that this is a rule that applies to all their communications with men. Apple also states that Norman better not be Fig's boyfriend, so is the actual rule that the girls can't be in a relationship with a man at all? Each of these rules serve to strengthen the control Apple has over the women around her, as she is the one who largely enforces them, and when enforced, these rules cater to her interpretation of it. In addition, she adds more rules for individual members depending on their behavior, such as restricting the promiscuous Cherry from having sex on Wednesday. She is incredibly judgmental and controlling, so much so that it makes her coven not unlike other institutions that seek to take away autonomy from the women within it. She encourages the girls to center women when, in my opinion, everybody should be centering themselves. But apparently Apple calls that main character syndrome. When Cherry first questions their new member Pumpkin, Apple outright asks her if she hates women as a way to abruptly end Cherry's line of questioning. And because Cherry doesn't want to be perceived that way, she stops. And Apple successfully weaponizes the coven's values of centering women. It's not unlike the idea of being a girl's girl in real life. Some have taken the idea of being a girl's girl, which in my opinion initially meant to be a woman who supports other women, and interpreted it as accepting the rights and wrongs of other women regardless of your own feelings and discernment. Not to mention, Apple is a hypocrite. For a woman who believes in not dimming another woman's light, she has no problem placing a hex on Sharon. In addition, when Cherry later confronts her on her favoritism towards certain coven members, Apple denies this and claims she doesn't believe in social hierarchies among women, except it's clear through her actions that she does. When her best friend Pickle gets a boyfriend, she hexes the man. And when Fig gets a boyfriend, it's implied that Apple already knows Fig is likely breaking coven rules, but she does nothing because she probably doesn't care as much. And I'm pretty sure Apple actually poisoned Pickle's boyfriend. That wasn't a hex, due to her being a suspect in 2 poisoning cases. So now here comes Pumpkin, who is set up to be Apple's new best friend, likely because Apple is aware both Cherry and Fig are breaking coven rules. Later on, when they're trying to figure out who the traitor is in their coven, she only accuses Cherry and Fig and seemingly ignores Pumpkin. So yes, socially, she does have a hierarchy and she treats the girls as such. We later discover Apple killed her father via poisoning due to him having 2 families and abandoning hers to take care of the one he created with Pumpkin's mother. Both Apple and Pumpkin argued that their respective mothers were his wife, so I'm gonna assume he had 2 wives at the same time, or Pumpkin's mother possibly did not know she was a mistress when she first met the man. But we do know that Apple's crime caused a big rift between her and her mother, because while Apple is choking Pumpkin during the climax of the movie, she cries something along the lines of, "Mom, why won't you just let me protect you? Why do you hate me for saving you? You're just like her and you're abandoning me for eliminating a monster. How could she not see?" And this is another example of Apple's controlling psychotic nature, which I believe is her fatal flaw given that it is the driving force behind a lot of her negative actions. But yes, her mother knows her father likely cheated and left him for another family, but that did not mean the woman wanted him dead or felt he deserved to die. Apple doesn't seem to understand that she can't control how others react to the men around them that they love. Clearly, her action negatively affected her relationship with her mother. We also see that Apple is actually homeless and living in her car, so she doesn't seem to have much familial support. Although it does stick out to me that, at least for the short term, Apple did get away with her father's murder. And given that her mother is aware of her crime, her mother likely covered up for her to an extent, or at least didn't cooperate with detectives. Apple's belief in regards to thinking her father should die for leaving their family almost reminds me of those that argue cheaters deserve jail time. The punishment doesn't really match the crime. There is one solution often used in reality for a father who abandons their family. You fine them, preferably an amount that covers the reduced quality in life a family experiences without its patriarch. But of course, I'm sure Apple would much rather just have her father in her life, and if she can't have him, I guess no one can. My closing thought on Apple is that she should have surrounded herself with women who shared her beliefs regarding men, instead of looking for pretty girls named after fruits and trying to control them. And the piece of advice to align with those who share your values applies to each member of the Free Eating Coven, to varying degrees, of course. Victoria Pedretti takes on the role of Cherry in this new horror comedy, and she is most known for playing the psychotic character Love in the Netflix original series You. Another fitting cast choice because Cherry also has a few screws loose, but she can be very loving. She presents herself as friendly and sweet and fits a bit into the bubbly, ditzy blonde archetype a lot of these characters are thrown into. She abuses alcohol and mentions that Apple somehow helped her with her rehabilitation by making her a planner. It's revealed that she's quite promiscuous, sleeping with a different man every day, every other day maybe. There's apparently a rule that she's not supposed to do so on Wednesdays, but that still happens sometimes. Anyway, it turns out that Cherry is hurt and deeply grieving the loss of her family due to a house fire. And this alone explains a lot of her actions to me. So Cherry doesn't want to be alone and has suffered a major loss in love and support. It's no wonder that she desperately wants to find community within the free eating coven and wants to be especially close to its leader, Apple, the woman who helped her curb her drinking problem. Now, one could speculate that her grief plays a part in her promiscuity, but she states herself the only reason she didn't burn with the rest of her family is because she was elsewhere hooking up with someone. So that itself is just part of her lifestyle. But yeah, the girl has a lot of love to give and she is fiercely protective. She tries to do her due diligence and make sure Pumpkin is a good fit for the coven, but her effort is shut down by Apple, which is just poor leadership on her part. Apple, you can't make your coven a space for women with fruit-themed names and accuse a member of bias when they ask, is pumpkin even a fruit? The same applies in real life. If you're hosting an event for tall women, and a reasonable question may be, is 5'6" considered tall? And of course, those parameters are for the host and those that attend to decide and approve on. In addition, Cherry clearly has a knack for fact-checking, and Apple could have assigned her that role so that they could have a proper discussion about these things instead of clashing in front of the group. Cherry's protectiveness does come out again later in the movie. When she feels like the coven might sacrifice her cat, she quite literally stabs Fig's boyfriend and tries to use him as a sacrifice, which is what Apple has conditioned her to do. Last time, Pickle's boyfriend was blamed for all the dissent amongst the group, and this time, Fig's boyfriend will be blamed, apparently. But of course, Apple, being the hypocrite that she is, doesn't approve, as if she'd never kill or hurt anyone, right? So Cherry will kill to protect those she cares about. And even though she was far up Apple's ass, for the most part she accepted Apple for all her faults. She only began to hold Apple accountable for her actions when she realized the same consideration wasn't mutual. Hell, with all that Cherry let Apple get away with in the beginning, I'm not surprised that Apple simply tried to seduce her to get her back on her side. It didn't work because Cherry's probably straight and she truly wanted friendship. This girl feels so alone. Her family is gone and the coven's weird rules don't really leave room for her to completely be her authentic self. So I'm not surprised she was ready to self-emulate and join her family. They were the last people who she probably felt truly cared by. Fig is played by Alexandra Shipp, and this girl is a small part of my childhood because I would just see her pop up here and there. Her IMDb claims she's most known for her portrayal as Storm in X-Men Apocalypse, which is probably true given how popular X-Men is. But depending on what media you consume, you knew her far before then. Your girl was booked and busy. Again, I'm digressing. We are here to talk about Fig. As I stated earlier, there's a piece of advice I'd give to each one of these ladies, including Pickle, and that would be to seek out a group of women you're more aligned with. This applies to Fig more than anyone. Out of all the coven members, Fig is the most stable in multiple ways. Mentally, she doesn't have any extreme biases towards one gender. She's not violent and she's not in a state of grief, although these girls almost put her in one. In addition, she has a background in astrophysics, of all subjects, and plans to attend graduate school, making her the only one of these girls with an active plan for continuing education. And education costs money in America, so whether it's by family, scholarship, or her own merits, she has the ability to support herself throughout school. Besides those obvious differences, she doesn't follow the rules of the coven because they simply don't align with her values and wants. There are small details of her behaving differently from the girls, such as getting a different lunch from them. She also eats a pretzel from Pumpkin's original job, even though the coven considers it bottom of the food chain. And she's also in love with a man, which the coven's rules don't allow space for. This reminds me of the decenter men conversation, or even the 4B movement that was started in Korea. For those who don't know, the idea behind the 4B movement was for South Korean women not to engage in dating, sex, marriage, or childbearing with South Korean men. And as for the decenter men conversation, I mostly found blogs and TikToks with women discussing what that looks like for them. Some say it's to acknowledge finding love with a man is not the most important thing you can do. Some say it's not prioritizing the feeling of a man over oneself or over those of a different sex. And some say it's not engaging with men at all. My point in bringing these conversations up is that some of these actions are simply not reasonable for certain women. For women who are married, for those who are in loving long-term relationships, and for those who simply want to engage with their sexuality in a healthy manner. In an equal loving partnership, which is what I'm assuming the average woman wants with a man romantically. Sometimes centering your partner's feelings, wants, and needs is essential, especially if you're married, have kids, finances, or who knows what else. And this brings me back to Fig. There is not much she has in common with these girls, and that's why she feels so alone in the group. She, like Cherry, has to suppress her wants and interests, or she just can't engage with some of them because what do any of these ladies know about astrophysics or state birds? It's not lost on me that she probably joined this group due to its popularity, plus to hang out with pretty girls and sell pretty clothing. I don't blame her. And Fig, funnily enough, is a go-getter. She wanted to be a part of the group, so she found a way, lied about her name and everything just to match them. And she managed to get into graduate school, so the girl clearly has ambition, but she's just not very confrontational. And it's to her detriment. It's great that she made a backup plan to get away from this coven, but by the time she realized she had the true opportunity to do so, she has hexed 2 people she did not really want to, the girls injure her boyfriend, and she ends up dead. All which would have never happened if she had boundaries and said no to the first time the coven asked her to do something she wasn't comfortable with. Lola Tung, most known for The Summer I Turned Pretty, plays Pumpkin, the newest addition of the Free Eden Coven. She's initially recruited by Fig and quickly ingratiates herself into the group whilst learning each girl's secret and eventually sowing seeds of distrust amongst the members. Now, Pumpkin is a stark outlier amongst the rest of these girls because she joined the coven with ulterior motives, wanting to gather evidence and expose her half-sister for murdering their father. So she reveals very little about herself while she learns a lot about these ladies. Her behavior kind of reminds me of Nano from Girl From Nowhere. For those who haven't seen it, in Girl From Nowhere, Nano acts as karma. She travels from place to place, inserts herself into people's lives, and indirectly or directly puts them in situations where their bad behavior backfires on them. In this case, Pumpkin did the same thing. She first observed, found cracks in the coven, and then later on she instigated by throwing up Apple's dessert, thus suggesting to the other girls that Apple may be trying to poison them. The girls begin to turn on each other, and after a few unfortunate events, Cherry and Fig die. This leads to a bit of a showdown between Apple and Pumpkin, where Pumpkin does manage to get a confession out of Apple, but dies in the process, and that's a shame. Going with the assumption that their father is a cheater, Pumpkin gave her life to convict the killer of a man who did not stay loyal to her family. She took on that burden, and now her mother is left without a husband or a daughter. And I'm not sure how involved Pumpkin's mother is in this investigation, but Apple does use the word overbearing to describe her. And I can't help but think it's probably because the woman knows her daughter is set on finding the crazy girl who killed her husband. Pumpkin was in a state of grief, just like Cherry, and she needed support. And Pumpkin does mention earlier in the movie that she never had any female friends and was a virgin, indicating she might be socially isolated to an extent. Whether or not it's due to her father's situation, no clue. I'm not even sure if she was being honest when she said these things because, again, she had ulterior motives being here in the first place. Either way, Pumpkin deeply loved her father, and that love wasn't fazed by the decision he made. Again, not saying what Apple did was right, but I do wonder how Pumpkin would feel about her father if it was her family he left. Apple and Pumpkin probably did see very different versions of the same man and would never see eye to eye on what kind of man he was. I believe both these girls' view of the man is a bit skewed due to their upbringing. Apple knew about her father's second family since she was a little girl and was aware that whatever resources her father had was being split between 2 families. Now, I'm not sure what Apple saw her father providing for his second family because they didn't seem well off either, but she did feel that he had neglected her own. Pumpkin, however, did not know about her father's second family until a year ago at this point. So for most of her life, she got to believe all her father's love and resources was being poured into her family, even if that resource wasn't much because she did claim her family couldn't afford an American Girl doll. So of course she became a self-proclaimed daddy's girl at heart, and it's going to be a bit harder for her to accept his faults. It's very possible that the man in question left both these families in a not so great financial situation, but Apple is just more aware of some of the reasons why. Even if Apple didn't kill the man, Pumpkin would probably still have a hard time seeing Apple's point of view because Pumpkin was the chosen child. It was Pumpkin their father chose to protect from even having awareness of his more selfish decisions. For Pumpkin, it's just unfortunate that she did not have the support around her to stop her feeling the need to avenge her father. So it's clear that the movie explores and somewhat exaggerates real-world conversations about what women supporting women looks like. But by making Apple someone who will kill her father over leaving her family or her best friend for simply prioritizing her romantic relationship, it ignores some common abuses that happen to women that may cause them to adopt the extreme biased beliefs Apple has about men. If we kept the story the same and added in that Apple's father was beating her mother, now how do you feel about her? She still means mean-spirited and psychotic, of course, because she killed Pickle's boyfriend. But I believe just with that added detail, the story could play out exactly the same and easily add more insight into the values, beliefs, and experiences of the women around Apple. And domestic abuse is not some rare, unlikely to happen event either. According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, nearly 3 out of 10 women in the US experience SA, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner. That's close to a third of the population of American women. And that's not to downplay cheating even, because that can lead to health problems and even death if one party isn't aware. But I'm messing with the optics and placing Apple in a position where there was a direct threat to her and her mother in the form of her father, just to see how the viewer's perception of her and the women around her in the story may change. I was definitely left with a few questions after the ending of this movie. I do wonder if the father in question actually truly left Apple's family, or did he just make them the family he visits every once in a while but not live with? Because if he was completely out the picture, that means Apple's vengeful ass tracked him down and killed him just for what he did. Number 2, I'm not sure if the hexes were actually working, because Pickle's boyfriend was probably poisoned by Apple, and Sharon got through the movie unscathed. But after the third spell, which was meant to oust the snake from the coven, Fig, Cherry, and Pumpkin died. So were they all basically considered snakes for not abiding by the rules, or did the hex they tried to put on Sharon backfire on them? I don't know. I guess that's up to your own interpretation. And a random side note, they kind of subverted the pattern some movies follow with having one blonde, one redhead, and one brunette girl. Instead, we have each, plus the additional minority, I think. Overall, the movie is a fun watch for a girls' night. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Its review scores are slightly above average across the board, and after reading a few reviews, it seems like everyone agrees that this movie is kind of a mess. But whether it's a good mess or a bad one is what's debated. I did want to investigate how much the movie made after its release and compare it to its budget, but I cannot find the movie's budget anywhere. It's estimated to have made about $2.4 million in the box office, but compared to the average cost of making a commercial movie in America, this would be considered a flop. And I don't mean the pocket watch. It's very possible that the film made back its investment and then some. It's not like they left them all at any point. Plus, they probably got brand deals off some of these store shots in the movie. I promise you, they alright. But I'm just aware that female-led campy films don't always do so well in theaters, and wanted to know if they cleared that obstacle for my own research. Anyway, that's all for my video today. I hope you enjoyed. Leave any likes and comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.